Now, it's been a few days since my last transfer update, and although there's no major breaking news really to get into to kick this one off with, I still thought it was worth jumping on to give a little bit of a roundup and an idea of where Liverpool are up to with just a month or less than a month now of the window remaining, because there are a few little bits to get into and developments that we're keeping across as they move towards that transfer deadline. And I think the main story here really is around Alexander Isak. It's the one that people want to know about the most and where Liverpool are up to with that, because of course if he did sign for Liverpool it would be for an awful lot of money, wouldn't it? And it would be a massive deal for them. So where are we up to in terms of that? Well, I have to say, to be honest, there's no real change from a Liverpool perspective on this story at the moment. I mentioned in my last video that Liverpool's position was that after they'd had that £110 million bid rejected by Newcastle, that they would not bid again. That they're still in a kind of similar position with that. That's very much their stance, I will put it like that. That they're not going to go back in. Such was the nature of Newcastle's response to that initial bid. But I think it's important to say, and I stressed this in the last video, that what changes that situation would be some encouragement from Newcastle, and Liverpool are still awaiting that encouragement. They haven't received that, and I think the key thing that would prompt Newcastle really to encourage Liverpool to make a bid would be if they signed a striker. Now they are of course doing that, and we're all following that story from afar, or they're at least trying to do that. And I think you have to admit that they're missing out on Benjamin Sesko, or seemingly that is the direction of travel on that story, with Manchester United coming in late and seemingly blowing them out the water. That is a bit of an issue for Newcastle. It's also a little bit of an issue for Liverpool as well in terms of their chase for Alexander Isak. I just think you see with Newcastle at the moment, you know, a club that doesn't have a director of football in place. He doesn't have that structure. It doesn't seem kind of well run in terms of the transfers at the moment, and that's why they're just kind of scratching around trying to find people who want to join. They haven't done the legwork with these players, and I think again you've seen that with Benjamin Sesko. If you've sold the project to him over a long period of time, you don't end up in a situation where he's just waiting for Manchester United to come in and joins them regardless. I think if you sell Newcastle a little better, particularly as they're in the Champions League next season and Manchester United definitely aren't, then Newcastle wouldn't have been in this position really. But of course we're not here to cover Newcastle, it's just my opinion on that one. But I do think, you know, it is posing an issue for Liverpool at the moment. Now what I would say is anyone getting panicked that means, well, Isak is completely off the table, I don't really say or get the feeling that is the case really. I think this is more of a delay at the moment than anything that you would make you worried that Isak definitely isn't going to become a Liverpool player. Now I'm not a Newcastle reporter, I will say that, so I'm not massively close to Newcastle and know exactly what they're going to do about things, but I would say, you know, what should encourage you, I think, from a Liverpool perspective is that, you know, this chase to Sesko, it seems to be coming to an end in a disappointing fashion, but you are still hearing other names of strikers that Newcastle are looking at. So, for example, Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea, Gonzalo Ramos at PSG, and of course Ollie Watkins at Aston Villa. Those names are already being mentioned as potential alternatives. Now, if Newcastle had resolved to just keep Isak on the basis they couldn't get Benjamin Sesko, I don't think we would be hearing those names being put out there, and it suggests to me that their position is that they've kind of realised at this point now that a sale of Isak for big money to Liverpool would probably be best for everyone. They don't want to keep an unhappy player, and for that reason, even though they've missed out on Sesko, they're going to go and look at alternative players. So I guess, you know, the key really for Liverpool is they are waiting for that to happen now. So, you know, who do Newcastle go for? Are they able to get it over the line? I know in the case of Nicholas Jackson that Chelsea are open to a sale there, so maybe that helps Newcastle out massively. And the Wissa story as well, obviously going on in the background. Brentford trying to hold out there, but again, they're looking for alternatives, and it seems like there could be movement on that front. So of course, if Newcastle get Wissa and another striker, whoever it be from that list, then they would be open to selling Isak. And as I say, Liverpool are there, they're waiting, they're ready to pay a massive fee for Isak. So I just feel like this at the moment just maybe delays that possibility, but I still feel like at the moment Liverpool fans should be encouraged and feel positive about the fact that once Newcastle get the business done, then Liverpool can move forward with a deal for Isak. But it's just a little bit of a waiting game, and unfortunately it doesn't look like he's going to be in for the first game of the season, that's for sure. But the job is to get it done, of course, by the end of the transfer window, because you sign a player for 5 or 6 years, don't you? You don't just sign them for a couple of games. So of course, moving on from Isak, if the plan is to sign him, then that would mean there's no real new room for Darwin Nunez, wouldn't it, in that attack for Liverpool? And we are seeing reports today emerging that Al Hilal are now closing in on a deal. Now, it's interesting, actually, because Liverpool are quite firmly denying, I literally had a conversation 5 minutes before I filmed this, Liverpool quite firmly denying that a deal is done, or even actually that they're in full discussions over a deal with Al Hilal at the moment. So that makes you think that maybe it's not quite that close. I mean, of course, sometimes they mislead, sometimes they're not entirely truthful, but I think it's interesting that they're so firmly denying at the moment that those talks are there, and I wonder what the factor is there, whether the agreement isn't quite completely done. I think what we can say is, we can all read between the lines. We all know that Al Hilal and Nunez has been a thing that's been going on for months and months, way back to January, so to rule that out would be absolutely foolish, and I think those talks are there. I do wonder whether the player's trying to slow things down to see if that European interest can come in for him late. He can only leave it so late in the window, can't he? Obviously, we're hearing about Milan maybe sniffing around, but for me, I'm really sceptical about that interest, really. I just think European clubs are not going to pay the type of fee that Liverpool want for Darwin Nunez. So for me, Al Hilal and the Saudi move is 100% the likeliest. Even if Liverpool are denying that a deal is quite there yet, I would be surprised, really, if that's not the deal that ends up getting done. And we wait to see what the kind of figures are around that. Because as I say, very kind of hard to see any European clubs, as much as that would maybe be the players' preference to stay in Europe, hard to see any of those clubs, particularly Italian clubs, don't have a load of money floating about, do they, getting a deal over the line at a figure that Liverpool would be happy with. So I would say with the Al Hilal thing at the moment, they look the likeliest destination 100%, and that can move very quickly, and I'd be surprised if that deal doesn't eventually get done. But Liverpool denying at the moment that it's done, and they say at the moment that they still expect him to still be in the squad for the Community Shield. So let's see what happens over the coming days, whether that quickly changes and a deal gets done. But at the moment, Liverpool denying it. But as I say, my feeling is that he's very much going to end up at Al Hilal eventually. Now, in terms of other outgoings, I've seen reports coming out yesterday that Harvey Elliott is wanted by RB Leipzig. Now, again, that's definitely not one that is advanced. That's not necessarily Liverpool denying it. That is the lay of the land in this situation, 100%. Get the feeling that Xavi Simon's potential move to Chelsea is probably key in that one. And once he goes, that opens up an attacking midfield spot, and then maybe move quite hard for Harvey Elliott. But of course, there are other clubs sniffing around. We know that West Ham have been there, Newcastle mentioned previously as well, Brighton also. So there are other clubs. But I would say that maybe that RB Leipzig move would really appeal to the player, because you think they're not in the Champions League next season, but they're generally in and around that. They're one of the bigger clubs in Germany, aren't they? And of course, so many young English players have done well out of there in recent years. So it could be a kind of a fresh chapter for him to go there and play there. And I think somewhere he would do really well as well. And he is still a young player, by the way, because he's still only 22, which is crazy. Only turned 22 in April, yet he's been around forever, really, hasn't he? So that looks an appealing move, but nothing advanced. But definitely talks on the player side there. So we'll see how that one plays out and whether other clubs will come in a bit more firmly at the moment. I think from Liverpool's perspective, their demands are going to be around 40 to 50 million for the player. But the expectation remains now that he will go. It's just kind of a question of where, because there just aren't enough minutes for him in this Liverpool squad in pretty much any of the positions he plays now, unfortunately. So that's one you would expect to get resolved before the transfer deadline comes around. It's just a question of which of those clubs goes the hardest and can agree the fee with Liverpool, and then it will be up to the player. Now, another outgoing I want to talk about as well, or potential outgoing, is Ben Doak. Now, you may have seen that I exclusively revealed yesterday that both Wolves and West Ham are very keen on the player. They're amongst a number of clubs actually who've expressed an interest in Ben Doak this summer. Now, Liverpool did reject bids of 20 million from both Ipswich and Crystal Palace in the January window. They felt that he was doing really well in his loan spell at Middlesbrough, and they wanted to see how that played out before they did a deal. So rejected bids of 20 million in January. Unfortunately, got injured towards the end of that loan spell, so that kind of counted him out a little bit. But he's back fit now, looking impressive and sharp in pre-season. But I'd still say the expectation is going to be that Liverpool would sanction a permanent deal if something around that kind of figure came in again. We're just waiting to see whether that will happen. If it does get very late in the window, I don't think there are minutes or opportunities for him at Liverpool. So maybe it gets to the end of the window and they have to sanction a loan deal. But there was big interest in him in January. There's big interest in him again. It's just waiting to see which of those clubs pulls the trigger. And as I say, a fee of around 20 million we would expect on that front to get Ben Doak out of Liverpool. But I think that's the feeling there, is that Liverpool would sanction a sale. I think the player will be open to it. And if they don't get that sale at the end of the window, maybe a loan. But at the moment, we're still in that kind of part of the window where I think a permanent departure is a possibility, and we just wait for the interested clubs to kind of show their hand. Now, just to wrap it up now, as well, one of the big talking points outside of Isak is Liverpool's need for a centre-half. It's my understanding they're still there for Mark Gay as things stand, and I think a key part of this really is the longer the window goes on, the more pressure there is on Crystal Palace in terms of their stance. He's obviously only got a year left of his contract. The deeper you get into the window, the bigger the threat becomes of losing him on a free or a cut price deal in January. So Palace preference seems to be to sell, and the amount that they can demand around that is just slowly creeping down. So Liverpool playing that waiting game there. If they can't get a deal over the line for Gay, if the figure doesn't come down, or there's big competition from elsewhere, Newcastle said to be interested, then I've said consistently that Liverpool will revert to the profile that they generally looked at centre-half, which is a younger centre-half. And I've seen reports of Giovanni Leone at Parma circulating recently. I did actually mention him on my Substack in July, so if you want to kind of find out about this stuff a little bit earlier, please do go there. David Lynch, lfc.co.uk, but he's very much a name that's in contention. But what I would say about centre-half, I'm seeing some panic, but it is still a strong feeling that Liverpool will get business done in that position. They know there is a need there. The manager has acknowledged that, but I think there's just that waiting game with Gay is a big part of this, and we will see how that kind of standoff plays out. But if it plays out positively, then Liverpool will go for Gay. If not, pivot to a different profile, that younger profile, and maybe Leone will be the one who ends up at Liverpool in the end. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Anyway, do let me know what you think about all those talking points. You're getting a bit panicky about Isak yet, or the centre-half situation, do let me know. Any ideas of who you would like to target in those positions as potential alternatives, and what you're thinking about the Nunez situation, the loss of Harvey Elliott seemingly, and what about Ben Doak's sale as well, if he were to sell him? Is that something that would disappoint you, or do you think it's the right time for him to move on? Do let me know your thoughts in the comments section, and as ever, if you can like and subscribe, I would really, really appreciate that, and I'll see you guys very soon.